So yeah, that's the Nine of Swords. The Nine of Swords, when it shows up in a reading, is a very unhappy thing. Normally, it means that you're being forced to look within. And again, the only way out of it is a whole change of consciousness. It's the most frightening thing. This is, you can see it's a very fearsome card, and to overcome it, you have to overcome your fears, because when you stop being the mind, when you stop identifying, telling yourself you are the mind, you are that thought process, your whole experience of life begins to change entirely. You realize the truth of statements like this life is a dream, and it can be very frightening, because it's like having a psychotic episode in many ways. And to get through this card, you have to pass through that comfort in who you thought you were in the back in the 8. But luckily, part of the plan has been all of this. We need to go through all these negative. The mind needs to present itself as a enemy as much as an ally along our path to fulfillment, to our fulfilling who our purpose in this life, because it brings us back to this introspection, this self-reflection. No matter how painful, when we get through and we analyze, we will find ourselves to be divine at the end of the tunnel, so to say, at the end of this long, hard journey of battles that we fight with ourselves, inside of ourselves and outside of ourselves, in reflections of ourselves and other people. We will find the divine in all of it. It's there, and we need these swords to cut apart the seeming complexities of creation, to find truly how simple it is. And we'll be renewed, we'll ruin that old perspective with a flash like lightning. The mind will be changed in the blink of an eye. A whole new reality will spring forth as someone realizes they aren't who they thought they were this whole time, that all the ways that define themselves were improper and wrong and false even, and that they don't have to be bound to all of those things. And with that lightning bolt, the swords destroy themselves. This new experience supersedes, goes above and beyond any experience, any truth that reason can find. It goes beyond, above, and outside of reason, but it surpasses and includes reason as well. And one finds the divine here in the Ruin card. When this card shows up in a reading, it's more so a release of the tension and the pain and the difficulties found in the 9. Of course, if a person isn't prepared for these grand awakenings, this card will just represent a release from faulty perspectives and faulty ways of life, a change in perspective that will lead to, if other cards say in the reading especially, maybe already happening, a new experience, a new phase in someone's life. And this phase doesn't come from exterior sources, but more so from a change in perspective. That's the simplest way to read this card, is a change in perspective. In the scheme of things that we've been talking about with the cosmic macro and personal micro, then this card really is the destruction of the ego entirely. Now that a person has got through the bars of the 9, their line up in pieces, they realize that all these broken pieces of what they used to consider themselves are worthless apart like this. And they never, there's a realization that they never meant anything anyway, that there was a false attachment to these ideas of the self, and the Ruin card is the ruining of that attachment to the ego. It frees one from that when expressed correctly, especially with Major Arcana in someone's reading. At the end of this series, we'll go ahead and talk about, after I'm done talking about the descriptions of all the cards, I am planning on talking about how to give a reading, what to kind of look for, how, different combinations happen, even the artwork, how the colors are important, and just, etc. I did say I was going to talk about the court cards, and I will do that now then. So, oh yeah, one last thing about the 10s. The 10s are the fulfillment. The 1 through the 3 are in the causal realm. Oh, excuse me. The 4 through the 8 approximately are the astral realm. The 9 is the bridge between the astral and the physical. In many ways, that's where the moon sits on the tree of life, and so it's also in the center pillar along with the 6, the 1, and the 10. And the 9, if this is to represent our actions through the moon, it really represents introspection, and that's brought down to the physical reality of the 10. This is the culmination of the suit. This is how it represents itself in our world, and that can be said because this sword suit is immaterial, it's invisible, and it comes down here into this reality, and it's almost like it's destroyed itself. It can't be seen, but it goes to be the moving power of creation. It is the power to create a varied number of things. The court cards now are a representation of personalities. The reason why they're a representation of personalities is because they're a mixture of energies. They're not, granted, these are a mixture of energies too, but each court card, except the princesses, and I'm not really going to get into this too deep. This could be a whole intro to the tarot, but I'll just touch on this briefly. The court cards, except the princesses, each contain within them the energies of 2 given zodiacal signs, where each minor arcana is 1 zodiacal sign but 1 planetary energy too. And then the major arcana, except for a few, are each of them various energies such as Mars or Aries or elemental energy. The way you could tell the representation of, outside of the signs, just talking about the elemental composition of a court card, the knights are fiery, the queens are watery, the princes are airy, and the princesses are earthy. And so you would say that the Knight of Swords, sometimes called the King of Swords in other decks, most decks, is the representation of the fire of air. And the fact that the knights are a representation of fire is why Crowley calls them knights, because kings sit on a throne, unlike fire, which moves forward and burns and creates change with its motion. And so the fire of air, the Knight of Swords, is a representation of a fast-moving, airy, intellectual individual who doesn't just use this air in a thinking, ideological fashion, but actually in a creative fashion. One sword is said to be longer and the other shorter for the reason that some of these attacks hit and the others miss. But with having so much motion as the combination of fire and air, being the seat of, the throne, like the king, still comes, that idea comes in, fighting for the ideals of air, fighting for one's ideals found in the 6. This motion found in the Knight of Swords is a hit and miss. And this character, when court cards show up in readings, I've seen more often than not they'll represent people. Usually if there's only 1 or 2, those may represent the person being read. If there's more than that, then it means that there's a lot of other people's energies going on, and it would depend what other cards are in relation to all these to say whether or not these relationships are good or bad. And so, just to touch on the court cards, this is a character who is creating a lot, both good and bad, but continues to go, has energy, and is unfazed by anything that comes in his way. He's a pretty powerful character, as most of the knights are, although he's not the strongest because he's not the most efficient. He's not the most efficient use of the air suit. The Queen of Swords, on the other hand, may be the most efficient card in the court card in the air suit. Her watery nature over the intellectual nature of the swords allows her to have because the queens are water and swords are air, allows her to be reflective with her wisdom. The knowledge that she has, she's able to reflect and to analyze and dissect easily and well. She's related to Virgo and Libra, and the Virgo is represented by the head of the hermit here being held in her hand. She's taken off the wisdom of the hermit, and she's bringing it out into the light of day. The hermit is a very airy card, being the major arcana of Virgo, who both is ruled by and exalts Mercury, which is the airy planet. And his wisdom, though, is but Virgo is an earth sign, and so that wisdom is found like deep within the earth. So it's like it's like someone tapping into that inner divine wisdom of God within them. But when it's just found with the hermit, it's not expressed outwardly. It's not shown to the world. And this character, the Queen of Swords, really liberates the hermit from his solitude and shares it with the world. She's like the disciple who goes to the guru and takes his wisdom and uses it to effect great change. The Prince of Swords, the heir of air, has no footing, no grounding whatsoever. This person is one who runs away with their thoughts. They're a daydreamer. I believe it's it's Capricorn Aquarius is this card, and the first one is Taurus Gemini, which I didn't mention, the Knight of Swords. But this one's Capricorn Aquarius, is the two energies related to it. This person may have many grandiose and beautiful ideas, but there's no ability to get them really to fulfillment, to fruition, without the help of really. You can see in this card that the chariot that this prince rides is drawn by 3 angels, but these angels aren't attached lengthwise, and so they could fly off in all different directions, and the mind is brought here and there and here and there again, and then over and around, and it can't find any, it doesn't even know its ideal. All these little angels almost represent different ideals that this person has, and there's really no greater ideal that they're following. And it's a difficult place to be, because one can become very confused and lost, especially if this card is reversed. But otherwise, they're actually kind of that Aquarian aspect of them will allow them to more so go with the crowd, to go with the flow, which can be very useful to them. But without that crowd, they can, get lost in their own mind. And finally, the last personality, like I said, the princesses don't represent, they aren't related to any zodiacal energies, at least not in the same way as the other court cards. They actually rule over a portion of the earth. The Princess of Swords rules over the Americas. Her, as a personality, is the princesses are very strong personalities when they are represented in individuals. They're characters who leave an impression, who leave a mark on you, who you remember whether good or bad, because of their force and their natural innate power. The Princess of Swords is one who has found this ideal. Again, we all revolve around the sixes, and the Six of Swords is in the its meaning is that it's an ideal, that it's the goal, that it's the perfection that we achieve after. And when it's brought down into the Earth of Swords, when it's so it's said that the aces are the potential that sit on the throne of the princess, the energy of the divine that goes forth sitting on the throne of the universe found in the princesses. And so that she's a representation of the fulfillment of all the sword suits come together. And this, anything, like I said, revolves around the six, it being the heart, the core, looking upwards, connecting us directly to the divine. And the princess, seeing her goal as pure and divine and perfect, puts all the passion and all the energy and all the drive and all the force into all of her actions so that she can see her goal achieved, so that she can overcome any unrighteousness, any wrong doing, especially when it comes into line with what it is that she fights for. Saying this and recognizing that she can be a most admirable and beautiful and strong and inspiring character. It also has to be understood that when one fights for improper ends, or when one uses improper means to achieve those ends, or when one fights for an impure goal and is deluded, which would be the reversal of this more so. But when one uses either of those, when one fights for an improper goal, they have to go back to the beginning to find what it is that their ignorance deluded them about and why they have to change their life path. But if you use improper means, even if it's for a good goal, again, you harm the goal. It's not, you're not helping anyone. You're not aiding in your own development, let alone anyone else's. And that has a tendency to show up with the Princess of Swords because she's so focused on her achievement of a better world that she forgets about those she hurts along the way. Those are just the negative aspects of her, which should be mentioned. The court cards, like I said, are often a representation of personalities, not only just in the card's description, because hopefully you see by now that each card has a personality of its own, whether or not it's a court card. And but they'll represent, the court cards specifically will represent personalities in the greater sense of people that we have in our lives. So that concludes the air suit. If anyone has any questions, if I wasn't clear about any of the points, I'm more than happy to elaborate, answer the questions in future videos as well. Sorry about the videos being a little choppy. I'm glad that the sound is coming through. But I want to thank everyone so much for tuning in, and I am excited to see you next time. I'm going to be tackling the beautiful and lovely cups, the suit of water next, before I do the wands and then earth. And I want to, again, thank you all for coming and joining, and I love you so much, and excited for this to continue here at All Things Sacred. Take care, everyone.